I need you to hear this. And not just with your mind, but with that quiet space inside you that knows when something is true. Because here's the uncomfortable paradox I'm about to put in front of you. You don't struggle to change because you're weak. You struggle to change because something inside you is pulling you back. And I know you've felt it, that strange, invisible tug. The way you can wake up full of determination, ready to become someone new, only to find yourself somehow drifting right back into the version of you that you swore you left behind. It's like you take 3 steps forward and some silent force, drags you 5 steps back. And here's the part no one tells you. It's not your motivation failing. It's not your discipline collapsing. It's not because you're just not that type of person. No. What you're feeling is a pull, a real pull, a force that operates beneath your thoughts, beneath your habits, beneath your willpower. A force most people never even realize is shaping their life. You think you're choosing to stay the same, but the truth is, you're being held there. Held by something older than your goals, stronger than your intentions, and quieter than your fears. It's the reason why your biggest breakthroughs fade. It's the reason why your old patterns feel comfortable even when they hurt. It's the reason why transformation feels like a fight with something you can't quite name. And if you've ever wondered, if I want to change so badly, why do I keep ending up as the same person? Then stay with me. Because what I'm about to show you isn't self-help. It isn't mindset, and it isn't motivational talk. It's a hidden mechanism, a quantum-level force, that has been pulling you back into the identity you've lived in for years. Most people never notice it. Even fewer escape it. But you're here. You're listening. And that already means something is waking up. This isn't about who you want to become. It's about what's been pulling you back, long before you ever tried to change. There's something I need to tell you. And when you hear it, a lot of your life will suddenly make sense. Because the force that keeps pulling you back to your old self, it's not random. It's not psychological weakness. And it's definitely not just how you are. There is a mechanism behind it, a structure, a pattern that repeats itself with almost mathematical precision. And the strange part is, you've been living inside this mechanism your entire life without ever seeing it. You think habits are holding you back. They're not. You think your personality is fixed. It isn't. You think it's your past shaping your future. It's something deeper than that. There is an invisible framework around your identity, a kind of energetic scaffolding that quietly stabilizes who you've been and resists who you're trying to become. Some people call it comfort zone. Some call it conditioning. But those words are too shallow for what's really happening. What you're dealing with is a quantum-level phenomenon, a field, a force that behaves the same way particles behave in physics, always collapsing back into the state they know best. And the truth is this: you are not stuck because of your actions. You are stuck because of an unseen identity force that keeps locking you into the same version of yourself over and over again. I will show you exactly what that force is, where it comes from, and why it has more influence over your life than motivation ever will. But before we get there, you need to understand this one thing. What's holding you back is not outside of you. It's woven into the very structure of who you believe you are. And once you see it, you'll never look at your struggles the same way again. Let me paint a picture for you, because sometimes the truth lands deeper when you can see it instead of just hearing it. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a doorway. On the other side is the life you keep saying you want. A calmer you, a stronger you, a more aligned, more courageous, more awake version of yourself. You take a step toward that doorway. You feel that spark of possibility in your chest. You can almost taste the future you're trying to step into. But then, something pulls you back. Not violently, not loudly, just firm enough to stop you from crossing that threshold. You look down, and there it is. A thin, almost invisible rope wrapped around your ankle. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't even look real. But every time you try to move forward, it tightens, it resists. It keeps you within the radius of who you've always been. That rope, that subtle, persistent pull, that's your old identity. And here's another way to see it. Picture yourself as a glowing sphere of energy, orbiting inside a gravitational field. Your old self is the planet you've been circling for years, familiar, predictable, even when it's painful. You gather momentum. You try to break free. You start moving toward a new orbit, a new frequency. But the gravity of the old one pulls. Steady, constant, unrelenting. It doesn't pull you back because it hates change. It pulls you back because it knows you. Because it recognizes your emotional signature. Because it's the only orbit your system is stabilized around, so every breakthrough feels like escape velocity. Until the gravitational pull snaps you back into the older, denser version of you. That's the dynamic you've been fighting for years. Not laziness, not lack of discipline, not a broken will. You've been trying to step into a new life while still being anchored, energetically, emotionally, and neurologically, to the old one. And once you see these metaphors clearly, you realize something powerful. You can't outrun the pull until you understand what creates the gravity in the first place. Here's where we have to break a pattern in your thinking. Not just tweak it. Break it. Because the way you've been taught to understand change is completely backwards. You've probably believed for most of your life that if you can just think differently, act differently, push yourself harder, then you'll finally become a new version of yourself. But that's not how it works. In fact, that belief is exactly what keeps you stuck. Here's the part most people never realize. Every new thought you try to create is being generated by the same old identity you're trying to escape. You're using yesterday's self to build tomorrow's life, and that's why nothing sticks. Your nervous system, the oldest, most honest part of you, is wired for one thing above all else: familiarity. It doesn't care about your goals, your dreams, your vision boards, or how much your life would improve if you finally leveled up. It cares about what feels known. And what feels known are the emotions you've lived in for years. If you've lived in stress, your body will try to bring you back to stress. If you've lived in self-doubt, your system will look for ways to recreate it. If you've lived in chaos, chaos will feel strangely comforting. Not because it's good for you, but because it's familiar. That's why new habits collapse. That's why breakthroughs fade. That's why you can be inspired for a week and then suddenly slip right back into old patterns as if nothing happened. You're not failing at change. Your body is simply choosing the emotional chemistry it has memorized the longest. You're not stuck because you lack willpower. You're stuck because your entire system is addicted, not to behaviors but to a frequency. And the moment you understand that, the moment you see that your struggle has nothing to do with strength or character, something inside you softens, a kind of relief. Because the truth finally becomes clear. You're not fighting your mind. You're fighting your physiology. You're fighting the gravitational pull of a self that your body believes is safer than the unknown. And once you know that, you can finally stop blaming yourself and start seeing the real architecture behind your resistance. Now let's step deeper. Past psychology, past motivation, past the mindset fixes that only scratch the surface. Because underneath all of that, there's a field, a real, measurable, energetic field that surrounds every human being. Scientists describe it one way, mystics describe it another, but the experience is universal. I call it your quantum identity field. It's the invisible blueprint of who you believe yourself to be. Not who you say you are, not who you want to be, but the frequency you broadcast without speaking a single word. Here's where the quantum piece comes in. In quantum physics, a particle doesn't exist in one fixed state. It exists in many potentials until something, a force, a measurement, an observation, collapses it back into its most familiar state. And that collapse, that return to what it knows, is exactly what happens inside you. You wake up wanting to be confident, but your emotional field collapses you back into self-doubt. You try to act with clarity, but your identity field pulls you back into hesitation. You picture a better future, but your internal frequency snaps you back into the timeline where you've always played small. It's not because you lack desire, it's because your system is designed to fall back into the version of you that has the strongest energetic imprint. Your thoughts are fast, your habits are slower, but your identity field, that's the gravitational center, that's the quantum ground state of your life. Just like a particle returning to rest, you return, without noticing, to the emotional signature you've lived in the longest. If your dominant frequency is worry, you collapse back into worry. If it's disappointment, you collapse into disappointment. If it's survival, you collapse into survival. Not by choice, by physics. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you stabilize, and until the field around you changes, every attempt at transformation will collapse into the same old identity. But here's the twist most people never learn. Your identity isn't just psychological. It's electromagnetic. It has a frequency, a charge, a resonance. And the moment you understand this, you stop trying to change your life with thoughts alone. Because thoughts don't alter gravity. Only frequency does. Now, let's shift into a different language. Not the language of physics, not the language of neuroscience, the language of inner truth. Because long before scientists talked about fields and frequencies, mystics, sages, and teachers across centuries were describing the exact same phenomenon using different words. Neville Goddard said it best. You always return to the image of yourself you hold most deeply. When I first heard that, I thought it was poetry. Later, I realized it was physics wrapped in spirituality. Every tradition has its own name for this pull. Some call it karma. Some call it the ego. Some call it your energetic imprint, your aura, your inner pattern, your soul's momentum. But the meaning is the same. You don't stay in the same life because of circumstances. You stay because your energy is tuned to a self you haven't let go of. Think about that for a second. You're not trapped by your job. You're trapped by the identity that believes that job is all you deserve. You're not trapped by your past. You're trapped by the emotional frequency your body still carries from it. You're not trapped by your environment. You're trapped by the version of you that feels real only within that environment. This isn't punishment. This isn't destiny. It's familiarity, your soul, your mind, your nervous system. They all sync to the same emotional rhythm until it becomes a kind of spiritual gravity. And that gravity, that subtle magnetic pull, is what keeps drawing you back to the version of you the universe recognizes as your signature state. Not because it's your fate, but because it's the only vibration your system has rehearsed for years. Here's the part that hits the deepest. You're not stuck in your life. You're stuck in your identity. And your identity has a spiritual frequency that echoes through everything you do, everything you tolerate, everything you attract, and everything you lose. Once you understand this, the world stops looking random. Your patterns stop feeling personal, and your struggles stop feeling like flaws. You begin to see them as echoes. The energetic footprints of the self you've been carrying for far too long. And when that realization lands, something inside you shifts. Not dramatically, but profoundly. Because you know, finally, that what's been holding you back isn't the world outside you. It's the energy you've been living in. There's something most people get wrong when they talk about being held back. They think it's their environment. They think it's their family. They think it's society or timing or luck or responsibility. But I want to tell you a truth most people never dare to consider. The force that keeps pulling you back is not coming from the outside at all. It's coming from within you. And I don't mean that in a self-blaming, motivational way. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying something far more honest and far more unsettling. There is a part of you, a quiet, hidden part, that is more loyal to your old identity than it is to the future you say you want. A part of you that remembers the emotions you've lived in for years. A part that feels safer inside the familiar even when the familiar hurts. And this inner force, it's not loud. It doesn't scream, it doesn't argue, it just pulls. Consistently, predictably, silently. Back into the person your system believes you still are. Most people never notice it. They think life is happening to them when the truth is far stranger. Life is happening from within them. Their inner frequency is orchestrating their outer reality. Their identity is shaping their destiny long before their actions ever catch up. And here's the twist that opens the door to everything that comes next. If the pull is coming from inside you, then the question isn't, who is holding you back? The real question is, what inside you is doing the holding? Because until you find that answer, every breakthrough you have will eventually snap back to the same emotional baseline. And once you see what's really pulling the strings, you'll realize you were never fighting the world. You were fighting an internal gravity you didn't know existed. In the next part, we're going to uncover exactly what that inner force is. The true source of the quantum pull that keeps dragging you back into the life you've been trying to leave. And once you understand it, nothing about your transformation journey will ever look the same again. All right? This is the part where everything snaps into place. Because if you've been wondering what exactly inside you keeps pulling you back into the same version of yourself, here's the truth most people never discover. The quantum pull isn't your habits. It isn't your personality. It isn't your past. It's your emotional identity. Not who you think you are, not who you wish you were, but the emotional state your body has lived in long enough to call home. That's the real gravity. Your emotional identity is the frequency your system recognizes as "this is me." And the moment you try to rise into a new version of yourself, that emotional identity checks your frequency, notices the difference, and pulls you back into the familiar. Let me make it even simpler. If your emotional identity is built on worry, you will unconsciously recreate situations that make you worry. If it's built on overwhelm, you'll find ways to stay overwhelmed. If it's built on doubt, you'll sabotage breakthroughs just to return to the doubt that feels normal. Not because you want to stay there, but because your system is calibrated to that state. Your emotions are not just fleeting feelings. They are the energetic code that defines which version of you gets activated. And here's the real shock. You don't return to your old life. You return to the emotional frequency that built it. Your old version isn't a memory, it's a vibration, a pattern stored in your nervous system, your subconscious, your chemistry, your micro-reactions, your breath, your posture, your tone of voice. Every part of you has been rehearsing that frequency for years. So of course it feels more stable than the new life you're trying to step into. Of course it feels safer. Of course it feels easier to return to. Your body isn't addicted to the past. It's addicted to the emotions of the past. And until that emotional identity shifts, nothing else truly changes. You can change your routines and still feel like the same person. You can think positive and still collapse into the same patterns. You can set goals and still fall back into the life you outgrew years ago. Because you're not fighting behavior, you're fighting a frequency. And the moment you see this, the moment you recognize that your emotional identity is the true source of the quantum pull, everything becomes clear. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more willpower. You don't need to fix yourself. You simply need to shift the emotional signature your body believes is you. Once that changes, the pull disappears, the gravity breaks. And stepping into a new version of yourself stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like alignment. Now that you understand the real force pulling you back, let's talk about something even more important. How do you break it? Because awareness is powerful, but awareness alone doesn't rewrite a lifetime of emotional patterns. To shift your identity field, you need something simple, something doable, something you can actually feel working in real time. And no, it's not affirmations, it's not forcing positivity, and it's definitely not pretending you're someone you're not. The first step is this. You have to notice your emotional baseline, not the big emotions, not the days you're overwhelmed or ecstatic or anxious. I'm talking about the subtle, quiet, almost invisible state that sits underneath your day. That low hum you wake up with, that familiar tension in your chest, that slight heaviness behind your thoughts, that background feeling you've learned to ignore. That's your emotional identity, and the moment you can see it, you've already taken your first step out of it. But here's the part that changes everything. You don't have to fight that feeling. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to solve it. You just have to disrupt it 10 seconds at a time. I call it the 10-second identity break. A tiny interruption in your emotional pattern that forces your system to momentarily step outside the version of you it usually collapses into. It's simple. Change your breath. Change your posture. Change where your eyes are looking. Change the rhythm of your movements. Change the tone inside your mind. Any micro shift creates a micro break in the emotional signature. And that micro break is enough to weaken the pull of the old identity. You're not trying to become a new person in 10 seconds. You're simply interrupting the frequency your body automatically defaults to. Because every time you choose a different micro state, even for a moment, you're sending a signal to your nervous system. This is not who we are anymore. Do that once, nothing shifts. Do it 5 times, you feel a little lighter. Do it a dozen times a day, your emotional baseline begins to glitch. It starts to soften, it starts to lose its authority. And that's the beginning of identity change. Not pushing harder, not trying to be better, but gently breaking the gravitational pull with tiny conscious shifts in your internal state. This is where transformation stops being a battle and starts becoming a skill. It's subtle, it's immediate, and it's something you can start the very next moment you feel yourself slipping back into the frequency you're trying to outgrow. There's something beautiful that happens once you start interrupting your old emotional identity. And most people miss it because it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't look like fireworks or a breakthrough moment or some life-changing epiphany. It looks quiet, almost ordinary, but make no mistake. This is where the real transformation begins. You'll notice it in tiny moments, moments that don't feel spiritual or profound at all. You'll be in the middle of an old reaction, right on the edge of slipping back into frustration or doubt, or that familiar tightness in your chest. And suddenly, you pause, just for a second. You breathe a little differently. Your shoulders soften, your mind loosens its grip. You shift the angle of your body or the tone of your inner voice, and something subtle changes inside you. It feels like the smallest deviation. A gentle turn, a half-inch step away from who you used to be. But that half-inch is everything. Because in that tiny pause, your nervous system rewires itself. Your emotional field recalibrates. Your identity loosens like an old knot beginning to unwind. Nobody will notice it from the outside. No one will congratulate you for it. The world won't applaud. The sky won't open. But inside you, the gravitational pull of your old self weakens. That's the silent shift. It's the moment you stop reacting from memory and start responding from awareness. It's the moment your body realizes it doesn't have to return to the same emotional baseline anymore. And once your system experiences even one of those moments, one tiny break in the old pattern, it begins to trust a new frequency, a new identity, a new way of being. This is how you become someone else. Not through massive life changes, but through small, precise interruptions that slowly dissolve the emotional gravity of who you used to be. People talk about transformation like it's loud and explosive. But the truth, the real change, the change that sticks, happens quietly, softly, in these invisible micro moments where your old self begins to lose its power and your new self finally has room to breathe. That's the shift no one else sees. But you feel it, and once you feel it, there's no going back. So let's bring this home. Not with intensity, not with pressure, but with clarity. You were never trapped by your circumstances. You were never stuck because you were unmotivated, undisciplined, or broken. None of that was ever true. What held you wasn't the world around you. It was the frequency inside you. The emotional identity you rehearsed for years became the gravity that shaped your life. It pulled you back into old reactions, old habits, old patterns, old versions of yourself. Not because they were good for you, but because they were familiar. And this is why your attempts at change felt so exhausting. You weren't pushing against life. You were pushing against a vibration your whole system had memorized. But now, you finally see the architecture behind it. You see the invisible rope around your ankle. You see the orbit you kept circling. You see the identity field that kept collapsing you into the same emotional state over and over again, and once you see it, you're no longer controlled by it, because every tiny moment of awareness, every small break in your old emotional pattern, every breath where you choose presence over automatic reaction, those moments chip away at the gravity that used to define your reality. You're not the same person you were when this video started. Something shifted. Even if it's subtle, even if it's quiet, it's real. You felt the truth of it. You recognized yourself in it. You understood the pull in a way you never had before. And now you know. You're not held back by life. You're held back by an emotional frequency you no longer need to carry. Change doesn't begin with effort. It begins with resonance, a new emotional baseline, a new inner tone, a new version of you whispering, "I'm ready." And once your frequency shifts, even just a little, your reality has no choice but to rearrange itself around the new you. Now that you understand the quantum pull, there's one more truth you need to hear. And honestly, it's the part almost everyone overlooks. Breaking the pull isn't the end, it's only the beginning. Because even after you weaken the gravity of your old self, even after you interrupt the emotional patterns that kept you looping back into the past, there's another challenge waiting for you, a bigger one, a quieter one, a more deceptive one. It's the challenge of stability. You can break the pull of your old identity. But how do you stay in the new one? How do you hold your frequency when life tests you? When old triggers reappear? When the world hasn't caught up to the version of you that's just beginning to form? That's where the real transformation happens. Not in the moment you shift, but in the moment you stabilize. And there's an entire mechanism behind that. A mechanism most people have never heard of. I call it the frequency lock mechanism. It's the force that decides whether your new identity becomes a temporary high or a permanent reality. It's the difference between slipping back and leveling up for good. The difference between I had a breakthrough and I became someone new. And in the next video, I'm going to break it down for you. What it is, how it works, and how to activate it so that your new frequency doesn't flicker out, but locks in, anchors in, and becomes the foundation of the life you're stepping into. If today was about freeing yourself from the gravity of your past, the next chapter is about claiming the identity you were always meant to live. Stay with me. We're just getting started.